Welcome. Thank you guys for joining. I'm excited. We have Hernando Planells. He's got over 20 years of experience from professional to national team to most recently was the associate head coach at Duke. Duke is pretty good program, men's and women's side. And now is the head women's coach at William Jessup University in beautiful Rockland, California, which is right near Sacramento, capital city. And Hernando and I met when I was at Duke coaching camp, probably at least 10 years ago. Has always treated me right, had a lot of fun when we've been together. And like I mentioned, we've been to Alaska, connected in Alaska. When I was back in Durham, got sushi. I think we had sushi.
We did. Yeah, we did have sushi.
We had sushi together with your kids, right? So,
yeah.
So I appreciate you joining us, man. I know big time commitments now as a head coach, because the associate head coach, kind of like an assistant, right? Top assistant.
Yeah, it is. It just, you just end up like doing more stuff. I think it's just a fancy title, right? I mean, like, you just show up, it's just nice on your card. It's just a longer title on your card. But other than that, man, it was like the same stuff. Just recruit and try to get players and win games.
That's what it's all about, right? Getting players can really help win games. It's definitely a big advantage if you have better players than the other team.
Yeah, you do. And then you have to like recruit them, and then you got to try and win with them as well too. Because I think one of the things that a lot of people just don't understand, like when you recruit top players in the country, they're all used to having the ball. So now when you get the top players in your program and then you're like, you got to pass the ball, they look at you like you're crazy. And I got looked at like I was crazy all the time because I said, no, you got to pass the ball. And so it's like, it's all those things that you have to try and like get together and get them, situated, understanding. And sometimes they do and sometimes they don't.
Sometimes they do and sometimes they don't. That's the challenging part about having your livelihood depend on 18, 19-year-old kids sometimes.
Yeah. And, I think like when it comes to just college, and even now, even in women's basketball, whether it's men's or women's basketball, there's a lot of parents involved. There's a lot of high school coaches, everyone's involved. And I get it as well too. So you're just you're really a politician, right? Like I say all the time, like you shake hands, you kiss babies. Like that's what you do, because you got to get people on your side. I mean, that's just, your players, you got to like get your players on your side, like every single day, because it's the battle of their mind against you and what you stand for and everything.
That's a great point. I love that for sure. It is a battle for the hearts and minds of impactful age in their life, right? You're working with kids it's a very influential part of their lives. So, we just started the B minor, and then the guy, he's below me. I don't know where he's at for you guys that are watching, but the X Factor, Walk-on at DePaul, hype man, energy, high positivity. And I saw him at the PK80 and was like, this guy's energy is infectious. And I reached out on Twitter and we've stayed in touch. And then during the quarantine, we've just been texting each other, kind of that positive, hey, how you doing? And then we decided, why don't we spread a little of our positive message to the world? And I think the world needs a little of that message right now. So the X Factor and I started this, and you were one of the first few people that I was like, man, this guy has got a lot to share that people need to hear.
You're talking about me? Well, if it's me.
That was you. Yeah, that was you. You're the guy. You're the guy.
I'll take
you
it.
Or wherever he's at for you.
What can I share, serve, and love? What can I do for you guys, man?
Well, the X Factor, he had some knowledge that he wanted to ask. I have some questions I want to ask. If you're watching, I know we have some coaches, some high school ladies, some junior college coaches, some parents. So we're just kind of going to pick your brain a little bit. But if you guys that are watching have questions, feel free to either raise your hand, like turn on your camera and raise your hand so I can see you, or drop something in the chat, because there's this chat feature. I'm sure everyone's been on a Zoom before during the quarantine, but if you have questions for any of us, feel free to drop something below or over in the chat, and we'll unmute you and you can ask away. But we usually start with a quote, a motivational, inspirational, sometimes we call it a metaphor, sometimes it's a quote. So X Factor, let's get you talking a little bit. Welcome. Thanks for being here, man. And give us your quote for the show.
I'm locked and loaded with a quote for you guys. X Factor here, coming to you live from beautiful Chicago, Illinois. I promise you it doesn't get much better than this. I know there's a lot of great cities in the United States and around the world, but I'm telling you, Chicago has my heart. So I'm here. I'm happy to be here. I got a little tan from last week. You guys might be able to see. Been running with my shirt off. You know, maybe not appropriate for this, for this setting here, for the Zoom, but I have been. Trust me. And I do have a quote to drop for everybody, right? Now, it's a quote that you've probably heard before, but it's a quote that I hold near and dear to my heart. When life gives you lemons, what do? You know what to do, but I'm going to tell you. When life gives you lemons, you got to make lemonade. Now, you can't expect anybody to hand you anything in life ever, okay? Don't expect it. It's not going to happen too often. However, life has a funny way of providing you opportunities every once in a while, once in a lifetime opportunities, right? If you can recognize those, you can go far. You can go very, very far if you recognize them. Life will give you lemons. It's not going to give you lemons all the time, but it might even give you just the, when you go to to a restaurant or something like that and they put a lemon wedge in your water, it might not be the whole lemon. It might be a lemon wedge. It might be a couple seeds. But guess what? With the seeds, you can plant the whole tree. You just need to know what to do. You have to have the knowledge. And if you don't have the knowledge, you need to educate yourself on what to do. When life gives you lemons, make lemonade every single time and you will be in great shape.
Love that. Make lemonade. So if you got the lemons, because sometimes life will give you tough times, but it's how you respond to it. Event plus how you respond to it is what creates the outcome. So
and I'm Greek.
Given crap, right?
I'm Greek too, so I'm a bit of a lemon expert.
Oh, you do know a lot about lemons. Okay.
My dad actually has lemon trees outside of his house in Greece, and then he brought some to the United States. Now in Indiana, we have lemon trees as well as fig trees.
Fig trees and lemon trees. You're a blessed man, X Factor.
Oh, yes.
So I have one that I'm going to share that I think is important. Ask yourself, will this matter in 5 years? If the answer is no, don't spend more than 5 minutes worrying about it. So if it's not going to matter down the road, if 5 years from now, what you're worrying about isn't going to matter, don't spend too much time worrying about it. And I think that so many times we get caught up in worrying about things that we can't control or that don't matter. And that's something right now, there's people that are like, gosh, the weather, you can bitch about it all you want, but it's not going to change it. So it's so important to worry about what you can control. And if it's not going to matter in 5 years from now, don't spend more than 5 minutes worrying about it, because tomorrow's going to have enough troubles of itself. And I think that short term, oh, woe is me mentality is a problem in our society. So I think we need to look more big picture, delayed gratification, long-term thinking. So instead of worrying about right here, right now, think about what's going to matter in 5 years from now. And if it's not going to matter in 5 years from now, don't worry about it. Focus on the stuff that's going to be important in 5 years. So whatever that is, the big things you want to spend focused on them. So that's mine. If it's not going to matter 5 years from now, don't spend more than 5 minutes worrying about it. That's what I'm bringing to start this one with. Let's see. Hernando, do I need to unmute you again maybe? Let's see. I'll unmute you there.
All right, there we go. I'm good.
Coach, what do you got? Do you got a favorite quote or a saying, or what's going to be a slogan? I think you probably got a few, but break something down for us.
Yeah, I would say be contagious, because that's, the name of my company and all that stuff. But no, I think one of the things that all of us have to really realize that, you have to try to live the same advice you would give other people, right? Like, what happens is that we love to give advice to people, except for the fact we never follow that advice, right? And we've done it all before, right? If we've dated someone, and our friend is dating somebody, right? And you tell them like, hey, you know what? You probably shouldn't mess with that person. And you're like, no, but I love the person. I love them so much, right? You're like, no, but they're not good for you. And then when it happens to you and your friend tells you, then you don't listen to it as well too. So I think what happens though too is that when you're teaching like leadership to your players, because no one ever teaches how to lead really on your team, they just expect you to lead. When you tell people how to lead, you've got to live with the same advice you give other people. And if you can't, and that's okay, like, because you're not going to be able to do that. But if you try every single day, then all of a sudden you get 1 inch closer to a great culture, to your team, to yourself, everybody involved.
I absolutely love that. And I love what you said about leadership. Here's why. I feel like we live in a society that's a bit too hypocritical. What do I mean by that? People want to tell other people all the time what to do. You should be doing this. Hey, man, you should be doing this. Why aren't you doing this? Meanwhile, those same people who are saying that are doing none of that stuff. So how am I going to listen to you if you're telling me to do something that you are not doing and that you don't even know how to do? So teaching to lead and leading by example is so, so, so important, not only in the realm of college basketball, but in the world as a whole. So I think that was really important, what you just brought up.
Yeah, and then, the other part too is that I don't know, all of you guys have probably at one point or another have been told to be a leader, right? But what does that mean, right? Because we all have our own outlook on what leadership is, especially if you were raised in a certain way. If you were raised in a home where you got yelled at all the time, guess what? Yeah, that's how you're going to lead, right? So when you have your players, or if you're a player yourself and you're yelling, sometimes you have to be like, all right, was this the right time to yell? Or how damaged am I? Or what has gone through in my life that makes me who I am? Now, that's not feeling bad about yourself. It's just being more self-aware for you so that you can go ahead and be like a beacon of light, I like to tell people, beacon of light to other people, and you try and spread all that around.
On my hands, I'm writing so fast. Beacon of light, be self-aware, teach people how to lead. That's something I think you're really good at that so many coaches miss out on is, oh, you're the leader. You're the leader of the team, but they don't teach. They just kind of expect people to know. And just because somebody's liked doesn't mean they're a leader. And sometimes there's that mistake where people are like, oh, that person's really liked. They must be the leader. And people might follow them, but if they don't know how to lead, you're going to have some problems within your team.
Yeah, I kind of, when you think about this stuff, they always talk about like the culture of a team. I know Will talked about transformational leadership, which is absolutely correct. But it's how can you transform based on the people that you have? So for example, I hear coaches say this all the time, and we've all said it one time. We're like, hey, when I get my own program, I'm going to change the culture. I'm going to put my stamp on it, blah, 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 right? Well, what about the concept of coming into a situation and molding and melding and embracing what's working well and then going from there? Because what I have found is that when coaches talk about changing culture, like, and if they start winning, then they talk about the culture. No, you just got better players. I know great coaches all across this country who have tremendous culture, but they're not good. Like the team doesn't win. So you need both, right? You need both, but it comes down to how you lead, how you talk to them, and how you present yourself. Like I always say all the time, when in my 20s, I was a yeller, a screamer, and a cusser. In like my 30s, I went from high school to pro basketball for a while, and then went back to college. And like in pro basketball, everybody's a little more calm. You go to college basketball, it's like they're like tyrannical. They're like yelling and screaming and saying stuff like you have no idea what's going on. And like, you don't need to do that. Like you can get your point across by not necessarily like ringing someone through. Yeah, there's sometimes you have to do that. But when you're doing it all the time, like it's very, very tough to do. So I think it's like growing it that way. And you may not get the behavior change you want, but if you could change your behavior or adjust it, then you're on your way.
I think what you said, culture, it's cool to have the slogans or the sayings like, up in the locker room, but your culture is your habits. It's your actions that create your habits. Or your actions that create your culture. So some people say, oh, well, win the day. That's a cool slogan. But if you're just like putting stuff off till tomorrow, you're not really winning the day. So obviously you want the cool slogans and sayings, but it's so much more important to have the actions that back up those slogans than it is to have the cool slogans.
Yeah. And I think I think what happens is that coaches or players, everyone talks about being very disciplined in their lives, which just so true. But there is a time to be very fluid. There's a time to be strict. Like I did my very first team meeting 3 weeks ago, and one of my players said, "All right, coach, well, what are the rules on the team?" I said, "Well, I have a no rule." They're like, "Well, is that a rule?" I'm like, "Well, it's a no rule, so we're going to call it the no rule." So that the no rule is basically don't do anything that's going to embarrass yourself, embarrass the team, and stop us from winning. Because if you do any of that stuff, this bus is moving and you're going to get ran over, right? So what that does, that gives, first of all, people the freedom to go ahead and mess up, but also gives them the freedom of somewhat choice. But then it gives you, the coach, the leader, or the parent, the power to say, yeah, you embarrass yourself, right? So now they have to actually like think about it. And now there's actually like a substance behind the behavior instead of saying, oh no, I can't do that because coach is going to be mad at me. You don't want any reason to be coach is going to be mad at you. That's what happens with our parents. I'm not going to do that because dad is going to be mad at me. Well, that doesn't mean you learned how to do it. It just means you're just doing it not for your own reason. And there's like all the science behind the learning part of everything else. And I could be boring forever, honestly. But yeah, that's sort of what it is.
I mean, I think what's important about that is finding what works for your team and then implementing that. You know, different people respond to different forms of leadership. And I think that that's a wonderful way of going about it because, like you said, it gives your players the freedom to, hey, okay, I'm going to go about my work. Hey, I might mess up. Of course, everybody messes up. But at the end of the day, I know that Coach Planells isn't going to, kick me in the face for missing a shot or something like that. You know what I'm saying? So that's definitely true. And different people respond to different things.
And standards. Instead of rules, the standards, the gold standard, right? Most people have heard of the gold standard. There's that Coach K book that he wrote, but having standards instead of rules, and we say don't do anything that's going to embarrass me, you, or your family, your last name. And you got to put the program first. So, and that encompasses a lot of things because you don't know what exactly is going to embarrass me. So you can say, oh, well, it didn't embarrass me that I was in my room with the door closed and doing whatever. Well, especially if you're at a Christian school, you're not supposed to have girls and guys dorms. That could be embarrassing to the program. So don't do anything that's going to embarrass me, you, or your family name. And that encompasses a lot of things for sure. Talk to us a little bit about the Be Contagious. So that's your program. You had that when you were the associate head coach at Duke. And you do workshops and use improv, but talk to us a little bit about that, Coach.
Yeah. So I started Be Contagious like 4 or 5 years ago. And it just, I've coached high school, I coach overseas, I coach college. I really have coached everywhere because I usually get fired everywhere I go. So, you can't hold a job. So because you just have like different ways of thinking. But what I realized that you watch how people are like, how they teach, how they coach, how they take in information. And then beyond that, I've been very blessed to work as a sports choreographer on film and TV. So I see that actors and athletes all prepare the same. So I started like speaking a little bit on leadership and communication and culture. And the reality is I started Be Contagious because I was at Duke. Like Be Contagious and Hernando, no one would ever show up to my stuff. Be Contagious, oh, it's the guy from Duke. Then all of a sudden, it's the brand that picks up. So, I was aware enough to understand that, but I would speak with organizations, speak with teams. I use really the power of improv to get people to understand how it is to feel or how to be in those situations. And really, I look at it from just a different perspective. I think people love listening to coaches, but they love the rah-rah stuff. Like, they want to hear the stories about Kobe and Jordan. Like those stories are great, but the reality is people like you, people like me, we're not them, right? Like you all saw the Jordan rules, or hopefully you did, or whatever, The Last Dance. Like no one's like that dude. Nobody. So the same thing with Kobe. So like the other part is like, every time I'd try to sell myself to speak, I said, listen, you can get Phil Jackson to speak to you for like $100,000. You get me for like $2. And I'm more inclined with your people because Phil Jackson's like 6'10". I'm lucky to be 5'10" in the morning, and I could talk to your people and they'd understand, where I'm coming from and everything else. So, it's those things I think with it. So I started Be Contagious. I have a podcast, the Be Contagious Leadership Experience. what I love about being at Jessup, because they understand, you know, what that is. They understand, you know, how important it is in terms of like a great athletic department, how that leadership and everything works together. So, you know, as I'm in Jessup, I'll still be doing all these different things with it. And I think it's just, it's a great time now to really talk about that. And then on top of that, I just added a diversity and inclusion part of it as well too, just because with what's going on in the world and everything else, and how important it is. Because I would always joke around all the time, like when I was coaching, friends would get head coaching jobs, like, hey man, you got to hire me. They're like, hey, I got to hire a minority. Well, no, I am a minority. Well, you're the wrong type of minority. Okay, well, that's fine. You know, that's just part of it. And by the way, guys, if you have any questions, like, listen, I'm not your typical coach where I just give you coach speak, right? I'm going to tell you how it is, what it is. I'm not going to sugarcoat anything at all. People in the media love me because I don't tell them all the same BS that everybody hears all the time. So if you have any like real raw questions, not saying that you don't have real questions, you just let it fly and we'll make it happen.
Drop them. If you guys got questions, he's a head NAIA coach, was most recently the associate head coach at Duke women. What would you say the difference? You coach men professionally, coach pro guys, and then college women at the highest level. Give us some differences, some similarities. How was the transition going from pro men to college women?
I mean, everybody wants to be coached, right? They want to be coached. They want to be pushed. I don't think there's a difference. I think it really is more of a difference on what motivates the individual more than anything. And Anson Dorn is the women's soccer coach in North Carolina. He's won like 20 national championships. And he talks about when he was in North Carolina, well, he is in North Carolina, but 20 years ago, he coached the men and the women. And in one game with the men, they were down 5-0. He comes in halftime. He gives them like those typical like coach speech, like we're going to go in there, we're going to trounce on them, we're going to step on their face, we're going to run right over them in the second half. And the guys were like, yeah, we're going to do it. They came out and they won like 10-5. The next week, his women's team was down 3-0. He's like, I have the perfect speech to tell them. He does the same thing. He goes, ladies, we're going to go in there. We're going to trample all over them. We're going to run them through the field and everything else. And the girls were like, okay. And they end up losing like, 10-0. And he comes to realize that the women were like, we don't want to hurt anybody. Like, we're not trying to grade it. We just want to compete. We just want to play. So that was like, I think the biggest thing. Like what I find is like when people say like, you got to be just tougher. Again, like, what does that mean? And how does that, transfer over? And then I think the other difference probably is I get a lot more hugs and thank yous from my women players than my guys. Guys are usually like, all right, coach. And that's about it, really.
I think I've noticed if you have one basket with a basketball and two guys, they're playing one-on-one. If you have two ladies, they're probably shooting and rebounding for each other.
Yeah. No, that is very true. And the other part is this, and Anson, I said Anson like he's my buddy. Coach Anson Dorn said that like, he said, when you're coaching guys like the individual accolades, right? So it could be like, hey, Brent, you did a great job today, way to do this, blah, blah, blah. If you're usually coaching women and you call one person out, whether they do good or bad, especially when they do good, then everybody hates them. Like, oh, you're trying to show up. You're trying to do all that stuff. And it was interesting. I didn't believe it at first. And then I would go back to my team and I'd be like, gosh, that's kind of true. So how do we get to that point? Like, how do we kind of level that field with it? But yeah, I think those would be like the only, I think, big differences with it.
There is a lot. I coached men and women my first year at Pacific, and the women, I felt like I wasn't having to prove myself necessarily as much, where with the guys, I kind of was like, I did play, I do know something, where the girls were like, oh, you're my coach. Okay, then I'm gonna listen to you and do everything that I can to please you.
That is very true. I coached in the NBA, well, D League at the time. Now it's the G League. When I was with the Maine Red Claws, the Celtics affiliate, we had Avery Bradley. Right, so Avery Bradley was a rookie, and like he would question everything. I'm like, all right, we're gonna go ahead and ice the side pick and roll, which is forcing, for us it was like forcing sideline. And he'd be like, yeah, but I watch video, why don't we do this? And it's like, part of you wants to be like, no, just shut up. I'm going to tell you, I'm the coach. But then you're like, Avery, I got you. You're right. That's a great point. But right now we're going to try icing it so that we can get in our best possible ability. And they're like, all right. A lot of times they're just doing a test you, right? They're just testing you, like pushing. I mean, really, we did that as young kids. We'd always push, our mom and dad, right? We just push them to the limit and everything else. So it'd be I think with that. But yeah, that's a great point, though.
For sure. Well, Coach Rebecca, I'm going to unmute you so you can ask your question, because it's always more fun if we can get a little interaction and a new voice. So we're going to unmute you, and you can ask your question whenever you see that you are unmuted.
Can you hear me?
Got you.
All right. So I coach boys teams, and I've had several guys that want to be leaders, but aren't necessarily the most talented, the most popular, or even sometimes the most outspoken in the group, but yet they still say they want to be leaders. So what is your guys' best advice to those players who want to lead, but aren't quite there yet as far as popularity contest and best athletic ability on the team?
How old are these guys?
High school, 15 to
Okay.
18.
First of all, I have to say your library behind you is very exquisite, very John Wooden-esque. I do love it. Like, that's very impressive. I have a wall. That's all I have. I gave me my books. No, you know what? I mean, my advice would be really, like, if they're high school, I think it's really just encouraging. First of all, I think what's really important is that if you have a notebook, it should be really good exercise to start writing the personalities of every single one of your players. And actually based on their behavior and what they say to you, not based on you judging them. And that's a hard line to do. But so what I do is I have a notebook with no lines on it, primarily because I don't like boundaries. I don't like rules. That's just like my personality, right? So I like to write things everywhere. So now when I'm speaking to them, now I'm getting to understand them as a person, and I get to understand their leadership style. Because here's the thing. Every coach in the country says, well, I just have a player, and usually the point guard. My point guard is great. He just doesn't talk, right? So if he doesn't talk, then no one's going to communicate. And, I've known a lot of point guards who are really, really good, who never said a thing, right? So now it comes down to what are the personalities and where can I go ahead and grab them? So, and again, it's one of those things that I think you can tell your whole team, like, everybody can lead, but what does leading look like? So if I'm the 12th person, and let's say I'm a freshman, maybe the 11th person is also a freshman. And maybe I go like, hey, they start talking, and then it becomes like a mob mentality. Then you get one person to do it. If you can get your last person to start shooting with the second to last person or third last person, they start going to the gym, that right there is growing leadership. I'm more encouraging you and any coach to do not look at leadership from a traditional standpoint, okay? We look at leadership as a traditional standpoint because of great people like Coach K, John Wooden, oh, this is the pyramid of success. Like, listen, I'm not listening to it. Like, it just sounds really good. And the reason why I say that is because it's proven that if I sold a book that said, these are the 3 steps to be successful, you're more inclined to buy that book instead of me saying, well, this is how to be successful. It's because I'm giving you the answer. So the same thing with leadership. So look at your players. If they're not talented or popular, figure out how they can lead and give them more responsibilities with it. Now, that does mean more work for you. That does mean you have to be more aware. That does mean you have to be like, well, this guy isn't like the best. I've got to pay attention to him. But you'll see they'll start coming around. I mean, even at Duke, like, we didn't have captains. Like, the captains only happen based on practice. So if your 12th person practiced really hard, you get to be the captain that game. Because titles, all of a sudden people feel like, oh, well, I'm the captain, so you better go pick up that laundry. When the reality is the true leader picks up the laundry and then shows how to do it. So I know I'm mumbling and I'm jumbling. I usually just go off on a tangent. But I hope that helps. I have no idea, Rebecca, if that helps at all. I'm just mesmerized by a library. That's really what I'm mesmerized by.
Some people collect coins, toys. I collect books. I've read maybe 10 of them. But it looks cool, right?
It looks
I bring people into my office
amazing.
and they think I'm highly intelligent.
Looks amazing.
That's awesome. I respect you, Rebecca. I love that you coach mostly like inner city Houston high school boys, and so you played an exclusive. So I got to meet Rebecca when she was playing in the exclusive, and she was coaching those guys up, high school guys, high school freshmen, sophomores. So I was really impressed. So I appreciate you joining in on this call, Rebecca.
Thank you for having me. We're actually in the Dallas-Fort Worth area, Brant.
Dallas, not Houston. Sorry, my mistake. My mistake.
No, that's
Texas
okay.
is so big. How do you keep it straight even?
It's its own entity.
It is.
That's going to be its own country here in the next 5 to 10 years, I think.
Don't you guys play with a 30.5 basketball since everything's bigger in Texas?
It's myth.
Okay. We have leadership books. So Will wanted to know about some leadership books. He says he loves Coach Wooden, Coach Summit. Coach K has some great ones. Leading with Heart, The Gold Standard, Beyond Basketball. But what about you, Coach Planells? What do you read, or what have you read, or have your teams read? What type of leadership books are you into?
So I'll give you 2 books, and you guys probably have read one of them. One of them is called I think it's called, The Subtle Art of Not Giving a Bleep? You know, if you've seen that book, it's really, really good. And a lot of it comes is because we're so ingrained on what we are supposed to do instead of ingraining ourselves into our own development as a human. Which is a huge thing. And the other book, now honestly, well, like I don't read a lot of books. I would buy books, I'd read a chapter, put it down because I'll fall asleep, and I kind of get things through podcasts or just articles. But I do read a book called Making Marriage. And what's very interesting is that I'm divorced, so I'm not married, but I read marriage books because they're great for communication. They're great for understanding. And I have to tell you too, I'm not a basketball coach. That I hate drawing out of bounds plays on napkins at a bar. Like if I'm at a bar, I'm getting a vodka. Like I don't want to drop a play. I could go on YouTube and find a great play for that. Right. But it's really, so I look for books like that. So Making Marriage Simple, it's written by a super old couple, but they've been on Oprah more than anybody. And what's great is it teaches how to communicate, because what I believe, my theory is, whether you are coaching, whether you are married, whether you are dating, whether you are a salesperson, whatever it is, the concepts are the same. And the concept is called, and I was getting nervous when I say this, flirting. The art of flirting is customer service. The art of flirting is coaching. Now, I'm not saying flirting like, hey, what's going on? What's your name? No, not that type of flirting. I'm talking about just the act of being full of energy, the act of putting your best foot forward, right? Those concepts is what makes a great partnership. So whether, again, you're married, you're not married, you have a team, you have salespeople, you run a tournament, whatever else it is, like those are the concepts that help it be successful with it. Like Brant, like I've known you for years. You're the same Brant, man. You showed up to Duke camp. You had your hair, your hair's been the same. You come with a smile. You're talking all the time. Like that energy. It's what you are. Like that is your flirtatious energy. And I'm not saying you were flirting with me, Brant, because that's weird. But I'm saying is that you have those qualities that transcends relationships, and that is what it is. So Will, I know I went off on a tangent. I mean, those are like some of the books that I've read. I've read the Coach K book. David and Goliath is a really good one, not the Bible story. The one by Malcolm Gladwell is really good. But like, I really like to read about human connection and what am I going to be able to do to get on your good side, really.
You're on my good side. I owe you one, Hernando. Thank you so much for joining us again. We really appreciate it. I know you're giving us some nuggets. Like I said, my hand, I'm writing as quick as I can because you're just dropping nuggets. And I mean, I think that there's a lot of that stuff just that people need to hear, just that, and be contagious. Because usually you think of contagious as a bad thing almost,
Absolutely.
or infectious, right? So I try to say, I want to be contagiously, infectiously positive, or good energy, good vibes. So not only is it being positive make me better, I want it to make everybody around me better. Kind of like the coffee bean. The coffee bean just came out. John Gordon, if you guys don't know John Gordon, exceptional writer, easy to read. And he had one that just came out called the coffee bean. So if you put an egg in water, hot water, it gets hard boiled egg. If you put a carrot in a boiling pot of water, it gets soft. But if you put in coffee bean in a pot of boiling water, it not only gets better, but it makes everything around it. It influences its whole environment. So instead of internalizing it like a egg would and get hard, or like a carrot would and get soft, it influences and impacts everything around it, the entire boiling pot of water. And so that's a great one. If you guys don't know, the energy bus, John Gordon, you win in the locker room first. Take note, write down, and it's easy stuff. I mean, I am not a big reader either. I have a pretty good library of books that I've never read either, Rebecca. But I did read Don't Put Me In, Coach. Great book about the walk-on Mark Titus at at Ohio State. And Don't Put Me In, Coach is the name of the book. Great book. But John Gordon books are easy to read and so meaningful and so impactful. So if you haven't read John Gordon, I encourage you to get in and read some of his stuff.
So what you're saying is be a coffee bean.
Be more like a coffee bean than an egg. Don't be an egg.
Don't be an egg. Don't be a carrot. Be a coffee bean. If you take anything out of tonight, that's what you need to take.
Be more like a coffee bean than a carrot or an egg. Be infectiously, courageously, encouraging and positive, and be contagiously. Be contagious, right? Be contagious.
That's right.
In a positive way, because good energy is positive. Positive energy is contagious, but then again, so is negative energy. And I don't believe in being a neutral. It's kind of like the Black Lives Matter situation. I don't think there's a neutral. You're either giving energy or you're sucking energy from a team, from a room. You walk into a room, you should impact the environment and the energy in the room. Don't react to it. Be more like a thermostat than a thermometer, right? I love these analogies because I can picture that. Thermometer just shows you what it is. But a thermostat, you can adapt and change the temperature, right? I think I got that right. Something like that.
I think you got it right. I think you're
close.
You're right. But what you're talking about is actually what Tommy had a great question, right? So Brent, what you're talking about is, like, first of all, I think what the missing piece of when it comes to people and being contagious is gratitude, right? Like that's the first thing. And I know Tommy had that question, Tommy, right? Yeah, the question about like what want to grow up and be a ball player, what mentality they need to have become great. You have to have some sort of gratitude, because there is a correlation between gratitude and high performance, right? Because what happens that a lot of people, right, they get so down on themselves. Have you noticed that there's more problems now with mental health with athletes than ever before? And a lot of it comes from the pressure. It comes from being critiqued. It's come from always not being good enough. Now, parents would say, no, I just tell you what you did wrong. I think you're great, right? But they're hearing it from everything, and they feel the pressure themselves because there is not the gratitude. If you hear all of your players, and I'm sure you guys heard speakers talk about this, saying like, hey, you want your players to say, I get to practice, not I have to practice, right? And so that's what a lot of people, so when like you have a high performing player and they're like, yeah, I have to practice, like they're not practicing gratitude. And being gratitude is being obviously thankful for the moment, knowing that it's a great place to be there, which it allows you. There's a guy named Jesse Eitzler, and his wife, right, found not spandex. Anyways, it's undergarments for ladies. Jesse Eitzler is like a guy, and he talks about having a coach. He wanted to run an ultra marathon, 100 miles. All right. And him and his running buddy could only get to like 30. First of all, I can't even imagine running 30. I can only get to like 4. 4 is a little bit too much, but that's another
I don't
story.
like to drive 30 miles, let alone run it.
Right? So Jesse hires this running coach, this guru for 2 days. And for 2 days, it's like $10,000, right? So they go, and the running coach comes the first day. All he does is you watch Jesse and his buddy just run. That's it. And he doesn't say a thing. And Jesse's like, why am I spending all this money? Dinner that night, the coach says, all right, guys, I'll see you here at 5 o'clock in the morning, and we're going to run. So they get there next day, 5 o'clock in the morning, they start running. All right, they run the 10 mile, the 15 mile. At the 20 mile mark, that's when he stops them, and he says, okay, now I want you to smile, and I want you to say, I got this. I want you to say, I'm the greatest runner in the world. And every time you get tired after mile 21, 24, 25, you're going to say that, because you're going to be grateful for that moment, and you're going to tell your mind that you can do this. It's how you push forward, right? There's the whole mind, like you got to grind, you got to push through. Well, what if you did the opposite? Because when you grind, you hate it. When you are grateful for it and you smile, you start loving it over and over again. So Jesse, I say it like he's my buddy. Jesse Eitzler goes 30 mile mark. They did it 40 mile mark. He wanted to quit the 50 mile mark. Didn't quit. He kept going. And that second day, he ran close to 100 miles, and he'd never broken it before. And it's all because he was grateful in that moment. So Tommy, I know I told you a whole wrong story to get back to this point, which is like, be grateful for all these moments. Like, I get to come out here and shoot. I get to come out to beer with you guys. You know, I get to do this. And yes, there is some sort of like naiveness to it. But for so long, we talked about that you have to grind and be serious and do this. What if the key is going the complete opposite way? I do orange. So I'm 43 years old. I do Orange Theory. It's like running, rowing, and lifting. I hate all that stuff. During the hour of my suffering, which I no longer call suffering, like I smiled during like the treadmill. I smiled during the rowing. And people think I'm freaking crazy because like, why is this dude smiling or laughing to himself? Because you know what? It's painful, but I got this. Like I got this all the time. So when you're able to do that, that gratitude comes in, performance goes higher, which is a great way to start marketing my new book. Oh, you can't see it. It's called High Performance Gratitude.
Love it.
Guys.
Where do you get that book?
Sir.
Where do you get it?
It'll be released in 2 weeks. So it's basically a 30-day gratitude journal is what it is. Because you take 30 days and it's really being grateful. So I'm going to give you guys a quick exercise. This is what I want you to do every single morning. You wake up, do it for 1 week, then DM me or text me. It says, H, that was amazing, or say, H, that was a bunch of crap. So when you wake up in the morning, the first thing I want you to do is I want you to get out of bed. Obviously, we all go to the bathroom in the morning. You look at yourself in the mirror. When you look at yourself in the mirror, you are tore up, you have morning breath, and you're like, I can't believe I'm stressed. But I want you to stop everything, and I want you to look at yourself in the mirror, smile, and say, I am awesome, or I am amazing. Now, your smile will look like Popeye, because we always like smile like this in the morning. We always have like one eye open when the lights turn on, right? So you do that, and I'm going to tell you why you do that. You do that, first of all, because you, and tell this to your players, you control you. And we talk about this all the time. But during the course of the day, you get beat up. If you're a player, if you have players, the very first thing they do, they hear from the parents, hey, did you do the dishes? Did you do your homework? Oh, you didn't run the right play. All these things. So now when you wake up and you give yourself positive gratitude energy, then your mindset changes through the whole process. Now it's hokey. I get it. Totally get it. But if you as an individual or player can't find the self-love with yourself, then how are you just going to perform in life over the long run? So when you start actually saying those things, like daily affirmations, like I am a badass. Sorry, I said ass. I'm just saying, you have to say those things about yourself, because who's saying it about you? If they say it about you, they're probably making fun of you, number one, or they're just saying it sarcastically. No, you've got to say it to yourself. I'm a badass. Plain and simple, even if you don't feel like it. Because I'll tell you why. I spoke at this conference and I said, guys, even if you don't feel like it, I want you to say it. So, of course, one smartass raised her hand and said, well, listen, I believe in being true to myself and I don't like to fake my life. I said, great, that's awesome, whatever. But I'm going to tell you what you do every single day. Every single day, you talk yourself out of stuff, right? How many guys do that? We talk ourselves out of stuff, but we don't talk ourselves into stuff. So when you start talking yourself into stuff, then all of a sudden, your life, how you look at things, your players, how they look at things will change over the course of time because your players have been brainwashed. Not on purpose. It just happens because that's what parents do over time. And again, I'm sorry. I went too far. But yeah,
good enough.
Into-
yeah, write that down. Write that down. Write it down. High performance gratitude.
Yep. I know. High performing gratitude. My bad.
I'm good enough. I'm smart enough. And gosh darn it, people like me. Daily affirmations are good.
That's right. Like it is really, and I say this all the time. Like I'm 43. I got divorced 8 years ago. My kids moved back to California. Like I had to go through a lot of different things. Like I got to Duke when I was 35 years old. I never finished my college degree until I was 35 years old. Right. So we all have our own personal stories. I'm not telling this to pat myself on the back. I'm saying you have a story. You have a story. You have a story. Right. But sometimes we allow our stories to really bring us down. Why? Because we love to romanticize things. Right. Like X-Man, you talk about your Greek. Man, the Greeks, the Spaniards, the Filipinos, man, they romance over everything, but that brings you down. So you got to create your own world in many ways. So I tell players, your IG world, your social media world, if you could combine that with your regular world, man, you'll be unbelievable. All right, I'm done talking. Sorry, guys.
I love it. Tommy's getting some jump shots up, but he wanted to be unmuted. So if you can hear us, Tommy, if you have your earpiece on, get the ball, come on back over here. I'm going to unmute you, and you can say something as long as it's not vulgar. You should be unmuted now, or it's coming.
It won't be vulgar.
Okay, Tommy, you're on. Here we go. What do you got for us?
I mean, so I'm working with athletes right now, especially with all the COVID stuff going on. One-to-one, I usually ask them, what's their mentality for next season? What do you guys think should be their mentality? Because there's now for the WIA, for us over here in Washington State, there is no fall sports. So I'm trying to figure out what their mentality is going to be like during the off season. What is your guys' advice for their mentalities?
Good question. I think you got to prepare like there's going to be a season. And if you prepare like there's going to be a season and there's not a season, you won't be disappointed. But if you think, oh, well, there's probably not going to be a season, so I'm just going to go ahead and hang out, and there is a season, then you'll have regrets. But I don't know, Hernando, what do you got on that?
Tommy, do you coach guys or girls?
I do not coach. I am a sports photographer.
Okay. Oh, that's right.
I've talked to you before.
Yeah. That's right. You look familiar. Okay, so this is what I think. I think you have to find the different motivating factors for people. Because players are told all the time, like you got to keep working because you never know when the opportunity is going to get there. You're absolutely right. But what about other things that maybe motivates the person, right? Okay. I was joking around with my coach with the staff. I was like, all right, well, if there's no NAIA season, what are we going to tell our players? Like, because, people want to work, but if there's no motivation, they're not going to come. Like making a basket isn't a motivation. Because guys, we have to think of it this way from a basketball standpoint. We tell our players to shoot 500 jump shots a day or make 500 jump shots. Then they play in a game and they take 4. Like the ROI on that is horrendous. Okay. But we tell them anyways, which we should. And I'm not saying we shouldn't. But what if you tell your player, hey, listen, we're going to work out hard. You're going to make some baskets. You're going to get in shape. And you're going to get ready for the summertime so that you can go ahead and take your shirt off, wear that great bathing suit. All right. Or you'd be like, hey, we can go ahead and get them. You could go buy that new thing that you want. Right. See, the thing is, today's players, they're not made the way we were, where all we wanted to do was ball. And I talk to coaches all the time, like, oh, well, that's the problem with kids today. Yeah, okay, that's the problem. And we have to adjust. We update our iPhones. We update everything else around us, but we don't update how we coach? No. So you have to find what motivates them. Maybe that person's motivation is because their parents went through a divorce. I say all the time, my son is a swimmer at the University of Iowa. When his mom and I got divorced, he was upset, he was angry, he devoted himself to swimming. And now he's a badass in swimming. Right? And that's just how life is. That is okay with it. It's the same thing. The major argument I get with girls all the time. In girls basketball, the goal is to get the scholarship. Then when they get to college, they stop working. Why? Because they reached the goal. So now what's the next motivating thing? So again, long answers. Find what intrinsically motivates that individual, and then you'll be able to touch them in a way and push them to another level.
Yeah. So yeah, mostly I'm working on with athletes right now is getting their kind of names out there, because there's no way to get athletes' names out right now besides scouts, videos. You can't get that one-on-one experience or, on the field access with them. So I'm trying to make a way of impacting them so they can get their names out as much as possible. I care about the athletes as much. So there's a lot of things going on that's making, they're trying to get in shape. They want to do this and this, but then also they can't really do that because of all the COVID stuff going around. So I'm kind of working on them with one-on-one, getting their names out there. Freshmen, college kids. I had a UW soccer player on the other day. Got a Whitman kid coming out sometime. It's just kind of just getting their names out there more, so more scouts can see them, scholarships. Just all of those things right now. That's what I'm trying to do, and a lot of people are seeing that. And it's nice to see where I'm at. We don't do that kind of stuff as much as now. So that's my opinion.
Awesome. Well, keep it up. 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 Well, we could wrap all night. We can go for maybe a couple more minutes. We got a couple questions. Ref Bill, what's happening, man? Thanks for jumping on. My guy should be refereeing at the exclusive right now, but yeah, it's been tough for everybody, especially for anybody involved in sports. I mean, it's shut down. But Dan's asking, in the college atmosphere, these players are in a big transition time in their lives. How do you balance coaching and then also helping your players grow as people?
So I think successful coaches usually coach the way their personality is. So like anytime you're coaching, you are helping them grow as people. Now, maybe they're in different situations. Maybe they're in a broken home. Maybe they don't have food. Maybe they're spoiled. I don't know. But I think in the college atmosphere, and I say this, at the Division I level, your job is not to save their lives. That is, I think there's very few coaches who will say that. The Division I level, you're about winning, which is why I'm super excited to be at Jessup, because you have like opportunities to actually be a student athlete and actually help them understand what life is. And even when I interviewed at Jessup, I was like, why would you come here? I said, listen, the Division I's great. Travel is great, but I'm not making an impact. So at that level, though, if you are making an impact, it is through text messages, it's through calling, it's building a relationship. But see, as a college coach, you are already battling so much because players now have access to their parents 24/7, through the cell phone. I joke around all the time. In I think it was maybe 1998 or maybe 2000, when the cell phones became unlimited minutes, that was the end of college coaching. Because in 1999, if I called my mom at noon because I'm mad at coach, my mom is yelling at me because it's costing $4.99 a minute. And she's like, you better call me after 9 p.m. tonight when it's free, right?
Nights and
but
weekends.
By that time,
nights and weekends.
Yeah, nights and weekends. But by that time, you had already solved the problems. So now there's no problem. But now you call your mom at noon, it's free. You're like, yeah, mom. Then it becomes for 2 hours they're talking about this problem. So it's again, how are you making an indent in your relationship with them. And every day you have to reset it. It's like that movie, was it 40 First Dates with Adam Sandler, right? And Drew Barrymore. It's like every day, like you build a relationship and then you go ahead and and then the next day you have to, it's like they forget, right? Then you got to rebuild it again. And the next day they forget. It's just the cycle of what it is. And there's some coaches who've been very successful by just going through it. But when you look at the real graduation rates of Division I basketball and football, they're atrocious. Absolutely. And then when you take a look at the rates of the jobs that they get even after they graduate, the numbers are even worse. So I don't have a great answer for you. Dan, it's really just like, how can I just keep on plugging away and hopefully you make an impact. But you have to find that balance, because when you start trying to save their lives, you're going to be without a job in a few years.
Very interesting, because it is different at the different levels for sure. I mean, D1, there's so much more pressure on winning. NAIA, D3, it's a lot more about the student athlete and the development and the experience, I would say. Obviously, I want to win games too, but I always kind of say, am I a good coach? Ask me 10 years from now, right? Like when the guys I'm coaching now are husbands and fathers and business owners or businessmen, then I'll know if I was a good coach. Obviously, everybody wants to win games. I want to win games. And if you don't want to win games, I hope we play your team, because we'll beat you and you'll be cool with it and I'll be cool with it. But most people want to win games, but it's about a bigger picture than that. And I've never coached Division I basketball. I played Division I, and it's a lot different time commitment than it is at the D3 level. But I think coach is right on there. There's a difference between the NAIA, and you're able to impact those kids a little more. Well, if anybody's got questions, you can reach out to me later. Coach Planells, how would these people get in touch with you, or how can they get on the VIP list? Do you have an email for Be Contagious, an email list? Do you give all your social media emails? Do you have Twitter, Instagram? Do you have a MySpace?
Well, I do. I have something better. So yeah, I'm on Facebook. I mean, really, if you go to Google and type in Hernando, basketball, I'll be the only one that shows up, right? There are no other Hernandos now there's Hernan Gomez, but that's not Hernando, right? So you do that. I have a website, hernandoplanells.com. You can go on there and it just really talks about everything that I do and the services, et cetera. I do have Instagram, Coach HP Jr. I have Twitter. I'm on TikTok dancing with my kids.
I've seen that. You're talented. You got moves, Coach.
Well, I have to stretch.
I have to
a little stretch, and then my son scolds me for doing the wrong move all the time. He's a perfectionist on the TikTok. But yeah, I mean, and I'll just go put it in the chat box, guys. You can go ahead on the website. I do a monthly email. You get it. It's like different nuggets on just like a different way of coaching or looking at life. I'll give you my email as well too, so you could have it. It's h@hernandoplanells.com. And really, like anything I could do to help or whatever, feel free to leave me a message or shoot me a text or I'm gonna leave you my cell number as well too. And you'll have that 9207. Boom. So that's my cell. I want to remind you, I only have one cell phone. I don't have a burner phone. Never had a burner phone, even when I was a college coach. So you text me, I'll get back to you. Maybe not right away, but I will get back to you with everything else.
Well, that's awesome, Coach Planells. I really appreciate it, man. I appreciate you staying in touch for so long, and you've always treated me with respect and treated me right. And I'm not an associate head coach anywhere, let alone Duke University. But now you're a head college coach, so I'm really excited to see those Warriors give Coach Lance a hard time for me. And I'm excited to get down there to Sacramento, Rockland, and check you guys out. So I do appreciate you joining and sharing all sorts of knowledge. I know the X Factor can echo that, and we're going to say goodbye, and then you guys will unmute everybody if you want to say thanks to Coach with your voices. I appreciate everybody dropping in the chat, but we do something where we say, if you're going to walk, Walk,
Walk
on.
on. Woo.
Almost
See, we're
got
getting
it.
better and
Almost
better
got
every
that
week.
down. We
Every
try to
week
get
we
it
get better.
synchronized, but we were both walk-ons in college. He's
Walk on.
Walk on.
I
Yes.
think we got it. Rock on, walk on.
Rock on with the walk-ons, baby.
We'll see you guys soon.
Thanks.